everyone. Welcome to Global Payroll Podcast, the fact check. This podcast, for those who haven't listened to the podcast before, this podcast is talking about the international payroll, the issues, the challenges, the overall mysteries about the international payroll landscape. I'm your host Amit Kode. I've been working with Global Payroll for last 23 years, and I'm the founder of EnvieHR and the host of this podcast as well. So before we start, I would like to thank everyone, those who have given wonderful feedback about the previous podcast. In case if you have to be, or if you like to be part of the podcast, or you want to be part of the podcast, please feel free to write us on info@nvhr.com. So yeah, we are moving forward with our guest. Our guest, the person whom I individually know. He is well connected with global payroll for more than 40 years. He's not only global payroll expert, he's also a founder of the wonderful organization called Paybix. Paybix, the pioneering company transforming the payroll landscape for international SMEs, which we often call it as a long tail countries for multinational organizations. Yes, he is from the country which is famous for chocolate, waffle, beer, and the national football team, which is called as Red Devils. Yes, you are right. It's Belgium. I would like to call upon Mr. Rudy D. Rock, the global payroll expert with 40 years of experience. Welcome to the podcast, Rudy.
Thanks for having me, Amit, and for the fine introduction. I feel proud to be a Belgian, the way you put it, and I'm really looking forward to presenting to our outstanding audience today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rudy. So before we start, Rudy, I just have a quick question. And while going through your LinkedIn profile, I saw a very nice or a unique thing, which is a tagline to your profile, which says "Payroholic." Where do you come from this? I mean, where do you understood this word, and how? Why Payroholic as a word altogether?
Funny, Amit. Yeah, that was so funny you say that. And I have to admit, it's probably not a usual denomination for a payroll addiction, but actually, it perfectly illustrates my state of mind when it comes to international payroll. Because from my very first career step, I've loved the world of payroll so much that I kind of got addicted to the payroll space cake. Oops.
Yeah.
And I'm actually
Okay.
pretty sure that a lot of the people in our audience have a similar condition because as soon as payroll flow starts flowing through one's veins, it will never leave again.
No, with-
So, after having spent the first 20 years of my career at a large international payroll provider, I decided to join Coca Cola back in 2003, shows my age. And I became a buyer of multi country payroll outsourcing for about 3 years.
okay.
Later, just after that, I was offered the incredible opportunity to become a global HR and payroll outsourcing advisor. And that was at a boutique advisory firm called Equiterra. Only a few people probably remember that name. Equiterra was acquired by KPMG in 2011. And I must say, KPMG wasn't the perfect biotope for me. And a year later, I decided to go it alone and with my own company, HR Top. I started engaging directly with Fortune 2000 companies that wanted to contract with the best fit global payroll provider. And some of my clients at the time were AB InBev, Allianz, Rio Tinto, and Siemens. So I worked with very great teams, very intelligent people, very smart, and beautiful people. But 10 years later, when I was approaching the blessed age of 60, I decided to launch myself as a payroll entrepreneur, which was the only thing that was still missing on my bio. For the rest, it was stuffed with payroll experiences, but entrepreneurship I hadn't done yet in the payroll space. So, based on my career in the international payroll world, I had experienced a lack of solid end-to-end solutions that combine state-of-the-art payroll technology with expert management payroll services. And now that's what I wanted to build and offer to multinational enterprises, together with my two great co-founders of Paybix, Bart and Hans. So I can honestly say that I've been nourishing my payroll-holicism, if that's even a word, for 40 years already.
Oh my God, 40 years
Yeah.
is like when I was in school, you must be already working on payroll.
Yeah, rub it in, Amit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing this. So let's talk about today's topic. And I really like the way you have chose the topic, but I would like our viewers to know more about it. And the topic what we have chose is Europe borderless yet not stressless. And why? Why very specific with not stressless?
Yeah, sure, Amit. And I think we first need to go back a long time in history, even to 1957, and that was the year that the Treaty of Rome set up the European Economic Community (EEC), which brought together six countries. Now, many years later, and since 2009 already, the current name is, as we all know, the European Union, and that union today counts 27 countries. So from six, they went to 27. It used to be even 28, but who doesn't remember and probably also regrets Brexit? Yeah. Now, why am I first referring to the European Union only instead of the whole of Europe? Well, in fact, it is to demonstrate that despite enormous financial and intellectual resources, it turned out impossible to create a social and fiscal union, even across only a portion of the European continent, because we should not forget that Europe is much broader than just the EU. Every day there's new countries almost that want to enter the EU. Next to the 27 EU countries, there are still another 23 countries in Europe. So in total, there are actually 50 sovereign states in Europe. And probably many people know, but every single one of them has its own complex social and fiscal policies. Nowhere in Europe have countries aligned these policies cross-border. So where today the 27 countries have a common trade policy, they still have not even begun to coordinate their social and fiscal legislations, let alone that the 23 other European countries are working on it. So you might say borderless, in part,
Yeah,
but definitely not
not
stressless.
stressless. And thank you very much for a short lesson of history and geography, Rudy. But tell me one thing. Now you mentioned that, and I agree. But how does this impact? Like, what is the impact of having such a diversified, challenging? How it impacts on the global payroll?
Yeah. Well, it's actually quite funny, Amit, because you said a short lesson in history. You see, over time, one can even become a talking head about subjects one failed at school, right?
Soon.
So now let's seriously. These facts actually only demonstrate that we need to be careful not to draw the conclusion that Europe is a single market, because only a bit more than half of Europe has a common trade policy. And as far as social and fiscal policies go, one needs to consider that each country have their own, as already mentioned. Besides, even national policies are not always 100% applicable to the whole country.
Yeah.
Many countries have provincial and even municipal social and fiscal laws. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And actually, the European Union only makes things worse from a social and fiscal perspective, because the EU imposes directives on top of the existing country legislations and then expects the 27 member states to transpose these into already antiquated local legislation. And then consider that individual countries can devise their own laws on how to implement the EU directives. Now, when we consider all of this, it actually results in a cacophony of social and fiscal legislation across the European continent with its 50 countries.
Okay. And does that impact all over Europe altogether?
Yeah, absolutely. And
I mean, especially when
yeah,
it comes to global payroll. I mean, I'm
yeah,
I'm just thinking because there are too much of details about the legislations and the different setup of countries and the way they are complex. So how complex those are? Like how challenging these legislations or the how it impacts on the global payroll?
Yeah, well, I mean, the intricate European social and fiscal myriad of legislations has an enormous impact on the payroll function's productivity and cost.
Okay.
You see, multinationals with employee populations across any of these 50 European countries, they will feel the pain every day. Now let's take the collection of employee payroll and time data that needs to go into payroll processing. Just ensuring accuracy, compliance, and timeliness of all this data with various local laws is merely impossible if one doesn't have access to a fully automated global payroll system. Now, such a system not only needs to allow for managing globally generic data, like first and last name, address, etc., but
Yeah.
equally important, the country-specific data, like, for instance, the famous church tax in Germany.
Germany, yes.
Always quote the same thing, but it's true. And the global payroll system also needs to follow, or to allow, actually, I should say, to allow for easy orchestration of all your local payroll processes. Or the international professional will go crazy trying to maintain all these local payroll processes. So in summary,
True.
they need to prevent, they being the system, they need to prevent the payroll professional from making input mistakes or overlooking any payroll process steps. Otherwise, the payroll will be wrong, will be late, will be non-compliant. Now, if you're
Absolutely.
in a payroll team that needs to plan and deliver multi-country payroll, then one of your biggest concerns is to stay abreast of the latest country rules. And needless to say, it's often already extremely hard to keep track of this for domestic payroll, let alone for international payroll.
True.
Right.
True. And I agree. And I think that's very valid now I can able to link it very well, because why you said it is borderless but not stressless, and how it impacts on global payroll or overall the challenges in legislation and localization. Now tell me one thing, that uh, if how do you look at it from localization, globalization, or a technology friendly perspective, how these things creates challenges on global payroll? So see, one thing you mentioned already about the legislation, which is major challenge, which is connecting, how it impacts on technology, how it impacts on globalization from global payroll perspective.
Well, that's a great question, Amit, and thanks for allowing me to give my point of view on this one. I believe that the only way to prevent the international payroll professional from lying awake at night if she can depend on international payroll software that permanently and immediately accommodates to new or changed in-country labor legislations. So immediately, with immediate, I mean not after months or even half a year, as can only be guaranteed by certain providers, which I won't mention here by name.
Yeah.
So when selecting an international payroll system, you better include timely legislative updates as a knockout criterion to guarantee compliance. As I said,
Okay.
not after a month, not after 6 months, but immediately. But next to the timeliness of updates, local compliance is also built on accuracy and completeness of employee and payroll data. Now, unfortunately, this is where international payroll software falls short too often. Now, of course, you can always stick with domestic payroll systems to prepare or even run all your international payrolls, but does it really make sense to work with 17 different payroll systems? Often
No,
they
true.
are in local languages that are
Languages.
impossible to master for the international payroll professional to only just quote one thing that's going to be very complex to master. Now, there are really excellent platforms out there that allow you to draw the international payroll systems card. You don't necessarily have to stick with your domestic payroll systems, or preferably not even. Now, the international payroll systems don't necessarily cover all the countries in the world. There's only a few that do that. They're quite expensive, I must say. But they generally are quite capable of delivering a solution for an entire region. Yeah, so not the globe, but regionally and sometimes sub-regionally as well. So, and that's why you may want to consider a multi-region consolidation approach rather than go full globe from the outset. Yeah, the risk of going full globe is much bigger than going region by region, which, by the way, is also a great approach to minimize implementation costs. As already said,
Yes.
these global systems are very expensive, so going global region by region may be the right way to go. So what we've experienced with Paybix, our company, when building Epix, our platform, our international payroll platform, core HR, it's that our solution is especially European countries put stress on payroll systems. Yeah, that's our
Okay.
experience.
Oh, that's the
And
solution you have came up with Epics, which you are building in Paybix, right?
yeah, so yeah, with Paybix, we built our development team have built, and our customers are working with our core HR and payroll, international core HR and payroll platform. It's a cloud native, it's a SaaS platform, and they really appreciate the fact that it's all in one, that it's localized, even individualized at one point in time to the level of the in-country payroll providers. So it goes very far. So coming back to why is then the European countries that put so much stress on payroll systems? Well, I believe that the culprits are both the historical social protection benefits, which are very
Hmm.
strong
Yes.
in Europe, as we all know, and on top of that, the fiscal creativity of European governments. In Europe, money is always short at governments, right? Probably in the rest of the world as well, but definitely in Europe. So every government is starting to get more and more creative on how to get more money into the treasury. And furthermore, let's not forget that the labor representations in all the European countries have also contributed heavily to making labor legislation extremely complex. And then we think mostly about industries like where there's a lot of blue collar workers, where labor representations have pushed very much the agenda of getting the best possible conditions and benefits for their, but it makes everything very complex. Yeah.
Yes.
And then last but not least, also the European Union imposes directives on its 27 member states to be
Yes.
incorporated in country legislation. So the only way that we were able to knock through the intricacies of European payroll was by using an international by design approach for our international payroll platform, Epix. So from the outset, yeah, since the genesis of Epix, every single decision we made in view of the data model and the functionality in Epix was tested for its international flexibility before it got implemented, before it even got on the roadmap.
Okay.
So and maybe it's maybe a bit not so
So
transparent or a bit
so
vague, but I wanna show it with some key elements of how we
I
do
was
it.
going to ask exactly the same question. I was going to say that can you elaborate or demonstrate the key aspects, because I really like it, because you and now I started realizing why we chose this topic, because it is stressless, it is stressful actually, not
Mhm.
stressless, and it is being borderless, being legislatively challenging, being technologically challenging, being localizationally challenging. You have came up with the solution of introducing epics. So I would definitely would like to know more from the features which is going to help our viewers to understand that how epics is going to help the overall activity to make it smoother.
I would be happy to do that, of course. So let firstly, you need to be able to send employee data and payroll data and contract data to any ICP in the world. And we know there are
Yes.
thousands of them across the globe. There are
Y-
thousands of
yeah.
ICPs. And you need to do that such that they can directly, these ICPs can directly upload the input from Epix in their local payroll engines. So Epix is an input-output system. Let's call it an aggregation system, but it's actually more than that. It's not only aggregating output, it's also allowing international companies to manage the core HR, payroll data, contract data, calendar data, leave of absence data, all in one for all their countries. And when the ICPs receive this data, they need to be able to upload that in their payroll engines without any manual intervention. Because as soon as that starts happening, what you're going to get is that the ICP needs to pick up the phone, call the customer, or I'm missing something. He needs to type that into the backend system, the payroll engine, and then things start going off track. Yeah? We need to avoid
Yeah.
that. Secondly, it's being able to include unlimited, and I stress the word unlimited, extra data fields to accommodate to country-specific requirements. From the outset, we did not know what we didn't know. We are not payroll experts all over the world. We don't know payroll everywhere. We lean on our partners in the countries, our ICP partners, to tell us how we need to bring in our system, in our Epix platform, the country-specific data on top of the generic template that we built. Yeah? And not only that, they say, these are the fields that you need to put in extra, but also these are the values that you need to send us for, even for the generic data. Sometimes the values are not always the same across the world. Yeah? You can have different values. Validations, that also, it's all this complexity that we, from the outset, have been thinking thoroughly about. Thirdly, as I mentioned already, presenting authorized values and only the authorized values, the compliant values, let's say, for data fields.
Yeah, compliant values.
Yeah,
yes.
Both global and local. Yeah, the global template, but also the local specific data fields, while ensuring that both dimensions don't clash with each other. Yeah, there's a certain priority also sometimes that you need to take into account when you do your international payroll.
Yes.
Fourth point, building an engine to map pay codes or wage types, as they sometimes are called as well, to make that are used by the ICP, right? To make sure that earnings and deductions are uploaded accurately in their local payroll systems. The thousands of ICPs that I mentioned before, they have, each one of them has their own pay code structure. And if we send data from Epix, earnings and deductions data, without a correct code for that payroll engine, of course, the payroll will be wrong. So we work together with the ICPs. We map their pay codes with our generic categories of pay codes, and then we can present it in a very user-friendly way to our customers, and our ICPs will receive the exact data from Epix. And finally, and I'll stop shortly now because I've been talking way too long. Finally, it's ensuring that workforce metrics and labor cost can be reported and analyzed granularly and meaningfully, allowing apples to apples comparisons across all your countries. And with granularly, I mean that you can actually need to go really deep down to the level of pay code where you can do your analysis. And meaningful is actually saying, okay, now we need to make sure that every single pay code from all these ICPs now are allocated to the right category of costs in your total labor cost. And then you can start comparing between countries. Why are we paying so much overtime in Italy? Why are we paying? I'm just mentioning Italy. It's my favorite country, so but then you can really start making for a CFO or controller. This is really fantastic information, right? Because they can go very granular and see, there are things where there are countries where we're paying, where our labor cost is way too high, and it's because of this, right? They can
does it have a dashboards and metrics too? Oh, is it? Okay, so see, so this is what I understood. So basically you are trying to reduce the pain for ICP for their system to behave well, because the data which is and then there is no manual intervention from both the parties, not from ICP, not from client, and not from Paybix team as well. So that's a wonderful approach. The second thing what I understood is you are also bringing in, well, I'm just taking few points, there are predefined validations and only authorized amount or the figures counts should reach to the resources from the ICP side, from ICP system to compute it correctly. It also has an inbuilt pay codes which is in sync with the ICP engine. You said pay code. I mean, I say pay code. I think you guys say wedge types and all that, which is fine. Which is fine. And the last one, there are dashboard and metrics which helps everyone, especially from the leadership perspective, to have the labor cost and comparison or the maps, or to identify where is a gap. I mean, for this particular country, where is a gap in compliance, or why this cost is higher or lower or whatever. I'm just hypothetically saying it. So this is a package, you are calling it as Epix. Is that what you're saying?
That's the name of the product indeed, yes. And by the way, the last one on the metrics, the beauty of it is it all comes out of the box.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
wonderful. That's wonderful.
yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's really I think that's wonderful, and I'm really glad that for all our viewers, there are products in the market specially built to cater the European challenges, and that's why the topic for today was Europe being borderless but yet not stressless. Instead of saying stressful. so uh, so I think that's wonderful, and I think your uh, now I'm going back to the first question, why payroholic, and now I can understand your payroholism, and the audience will apparently come to know why you are tagged as a payroholic. So I'm really thankful to you. I think we are over the time. We are about to close the session. I would like to thank everybody who's viewing this podcast. My sincere gratitude to all of you for watching it. Please share your feedback. How are you liking the podcast? Do you need to have any specific topic or a discussion which needs to be bring it on this podcast? I would like to thank you, Rudy, and Paybix team for creating such a wonderful product and also being here and giving me time on such a short notice. In case anybody would like to have a demo or would like to speak to Rudy and you're not able to find the contacts, please feel free to contact me. I can get you in contact with him. You can write me on info@enviehr. Any last words, anything which you would like to speak before you leave, Rudy, and before we wrap up the session?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, Amit, for having me again, and I want to thank also our listeners, our wonderful audience for today, for allowing me to talk about my payroll. Maybe just one thing to avoid misunderstandings. Epix is a global platform, not only Europe. I was talking
Not
about
only
Europe in
Europe.
particular, but we can roll out Epix all over the world. And it will be compliant everywhere with the local data localization and individualization where necessary. So thanks again, everyone, and thank you, Amit.
Thank you, Rudy, for being here. Let's see you on the next topic on the Global Payroll Fact Check. Bye bye.